Chapter 12, Hallucinogens. This is the full video of my lecture for the Substance Use Disorder Counseling and Chemical Dependency classes. This video will examine the origins of hallucinogens, the various types, and some of the problems with their use. This video is by David Joel Miller. Some of the material originally appeared on the counselorsoapbox.com blog. The photos are courtesy of pixabay.com and Wikimedia Commons, licensed under the Creative Commons free for use, no attribution required license. Hallucinogens produce sensory disturbances or alterations. They can change affect, mood, thinking processes, physiological processes. Over 90 different plants have been classified as hallucinogens, and there are many more synthetic chemicals. The major categories of hallucinogens are important to understand. While the majority of drug counselors will work with clients with other addictions, occasionally you will find a client who has been abusing or using certain kinds of hallucinogens. The major categories are serotoninogenic hallucinogens such as LSD, methylated amphetamines, ecstasy, and related compounds, anticholinergic hallucinogens, belladonna and other plants, dissociative anesthetic hallucinogens such as PCP, salvinorin A, Salvia, which is a kappa opioid connection, and there is some crossover. Some of these plant-based hallucinogens may affect multiple systems. The principal serotoninogenic hallucinogens are LSD-25, mescaline, which is also related to the methylated amphetamines, psilocybin. All produce vivid visual hallucinations and may show cross-tolerance with each other. The history of serotoninogenic hallucinogens and some of their properties. They were used by indigenous people for religious rituals. LSD-25 was discovered by Hoffman in 1938. Ergot fungus grows on rye bread, and in Europe, because of the colder temperatures, they grow a lot more rye bread rather than the wheat bread we have here in the United States. Rye bread has a shorter growing season. The contaminated bread is thought to be responsible for episodes of St. Anthony's fire in the Middle Ages. LSD-25 became popular in the 1960s. Some of the mechanism of action: very small doses create large results. They include visual hallucinations and alterations to consciousness. Tolerance builds rapidly, similar to mescaline, which develops tolerance rapidly also. One of the older sayings was, you can't use LSD 2 days in a row because tolerance builds so rapidly the second day you would need a larger dose. LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, and other serotoninogenic hallucinations show cross-tolerance to each other. Someone who's used LSD will have a high tolerance for mescaline or psilocybin the first time they take it. Psychotherapeutic uses for LSD-type drugs have been and remain controversial. It was once thought to be helpful in researching schizophrenia. No, the drug is no longer used this way. For one thing, the hallucinations are quite different. LSD, the hallucinations are mostly visual. In schizophrenia, hallucinations are mostly auditory. However, the same antipsychotics are used to treat both types of hallucinations. The effects of serotoninogenic hallucinogens are physically similar to the amphetamines. Remember, when we talked about stimulant drugs, there's such a thing as stimulant psychosis. They increase the heart rate. There's an increased blood pressure, increased body temperature, sweating, and pupil dilation. The methylated amphetamines include MDA, MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy. In a powdered crystalline form, MDMA is often referred to as Molly, short for molecule. There are dozens of other drugs. Most of these are synthetic compounds. They have some visual effects, some stimulant amphetamine-like effects with no visual effects, and they act on the dopamine neurotransmitter system, the norepinephrine system, and serotonin. There are reports of many adverse effects that have resulted in reduced use of ecstasy. Ecstasy use has been linked to brain damage, death. Animal research has implicated the drug in brain damage. We're going to look at cooking of rat brains in a moment. It was moved to Schedule 1 in 1985. The tablets on the right are typical of the way ecstasy tablets are sold. Many of the tablets that are on the street, when analyzed, contain little or no MDMA, and therefore the results that we hear of street use and the results we get in laboratory experiments may be quite different. Some of the effects of methylated amphetamines, and the effects can vary. Binge use is common. After effects include drowsiness, muscle pain, depression, paranoia, and anxiety. It's common for users to do stacking or multiple doses, which create high doses that increase the risk. Serious reactions and death can happen even at low doses. Toxicity, there are reports of toxic reactions and death. One of the reasons it is so dangerous is that it causes dehydration, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, muscle breakdown, kidney failure, stroke, seizure, and heart attacks. Cooking of brains. One of the ways that the problems with MDMA were detected was by experiments on rats. MDMA, or ecstasy, is a vasoconstrictor. So while the rat or the person taking ecstasy may feel hot, the heat is not being lost, and the heat concentrates in the brain region. So rats given MDMA can reach temperatures that rise to dangerous levels. Lots of water doesn't help because the vessels are constricted and they can't sweat or lose heat to the air. In fact, lots of water reduces the sodium level in the bloodstream so much that it becomes dangerous. The result is that the brain cells can literally cook. As a confound of this, many samples collected on the streets and tested contain no MDMA or have many added chemicals. Many of the samples that were tested were largely methamphetamine and some LSD or another hallucinogenic synthetic chemical. Residual effects of MDMA. Long-term damage to certain brain structures. It is a neurotoxin. Single high doses can do damage. Small doses over several days do damage. The effects can persist for as long as 7 years, possibly longer. Heavy users have sleep problems, depressed mood, memory impairment, and cognitive deficits. Users have more psychological or psychopathology than non-users. The question becomes, which causes which? Did the people develop the psychopathology as a result of abusing MDMA, or is it that people with serious mental illnesses are attracted to and like the effects of ecstasy? Anticholinergic hallucinogens are mostly plant origin. They include things like atropine, scopolamine. They produce a dream-like trance, and people may have no memory of the events. These chemicals work on acetylcholine receptors. Anticholinergic hallucinogens are found in many plants. Belladonna, which is deadly nightshade, mandrake, henbane, jimson weed, and datura. Fly agaric mushrooms also contain this. Many of the legends from the Middle Ages of witches administering tea or brews that caused them to do all kinds of strange things for people to hallucinate and fly through the air may well have been the result of these anticholinergic hallucinogens in the tea. High doses can be fatal, and what's high varies from one person to another. These can cause respiratory collapse, and there is very little margin of safety. Disassociative anesthetics are largely synthetic drugs, an exception to the rule that most hallucinogens are in fact derived from plants or plant origin. The principal dissociative anesthetics are PCP, known affectionately by some users as angel dust, though the PCP powder can be mixed with a number of other substances, such as mixed in with marijuana and smoked. Another dissociative anesthetic is ketamine, which produces a semi-conscious state. Routes of administration can include snorting, injecting, oral use, or smoking. The pharmacokinetics of dissociative anesthetics works on excitatory hormone glutamate, stays in the bloodstream unmetabolized for 2 or more days, detectable in the urine for several weeks after a single use. Some of the effects of dissociative anesthetics, such as PCP, include feelings of euphoria and numbness. It resembles an alcoholic intoxication. May include slurred speech, motor discoordinations. Maybe the person taking it may be catatonic with a blank stare. They may be aggressive and hyperactive, profusely sweating, have an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, rapid jerky eye movement, blurred or double vision. The effects are often described as being in the K-hole. They can last for 4 to 6 hours, may persist in some users for days or even weeks. Results may include seizures, prolonged coma, or death from respiratory failure. Paranoia and violence may persist for several days after a single use. Bowgame is one of the newer hallucinogenics, though it's been used religiously in Africa for a very long time. It acts like a serotoninogenic hallucinogen, but also affects the glutamate, endorphin, and norepinephrine neurotransmitter systems. There's some claims that it helps people to recover from addiction, though it may be the social way in which it's administered in some of the African ceremonies. Salvinorin A, or Salvia, is one of the other atypical plant-based hallucinogens. The Salvia divinorum plant is one type of sage, one out of 350 different sage varieties. To date, it is the only one of the sages that has demonstrated any hallucinogenic properties. I have to wonder who has tested all 350 sages to see that none of the others have those properties. It works on, it's a kappa hallucinogen, works on only one very specialized opiate receptor, the D2, and since 2009 in California, it has been illegal to sell to minors under 18. Interesting way in which this law was written. Under the legal definition of sales, any transfer of ownership, whether any money or anything of value changed hands, is considered selling. So even giving it free to a minor, to someone under 18, you can be arrested for sales of a controlled substance. Salvinorin A, or Salvia, was used by one tribe of Native Americans in southern Mexico, some of the sources say into Central America. It was ingested by chewing the leaves. The leaves can be made into tea. The leaves can be dried and smoked. Extracts can be used orally or smoked. The effects last about 30 minutes, and the legal status varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. This is a hallucinogen which typically makes the user very nauseous, and many people who take it throw up. People I've talked to who have tried it have said that the results were so unpleasant they never did it a second time. Despite that unpleasantness and poor results, every year another crop of young people purchase and try Salvia, Salvinorin A. Chapter 12, Hallucinogens, some terminology that students should know. Not all of these were covered in this video, but flashback actually made its way into the DSM as a persistent hallucinogenic recurrence. Flashbacks used to be urban legend, the idea that the chemical, LSD particularly, hid in the bone marrow where certain cells in the body and then under stress came out. In fact, when people have flashbacks and are tested, we found none of the hallucinogen in their system. Flashbacks seem to be that experiences that they had under the influence of hallucinogens were so powerful, they are stored as such powerful memories that all kinds of things can trigger a recurrence of those memories in the way that in PTSD, recurring memories may seem real as if they're re-experiencing the event. Flashing lights can be one thing to trigger these hallucinogenic flashbacks. Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic. Recently, it's been tested for use as a one-time injectable drug with an idea of curing depression. I have my skepticism, but there is some positive research there. Mescaline is another type of hallucinogen. Methylated amphetamines, a crossover group that act in some respects as stimulants, amphetamines, but in some respects change feeling. MDMA, ecstasy, known as the love drug, because in addition to stimulating action, it also makes people feel more affectionate. Psilocybin from the mushroom. Synesthesia is something we didn't cover in this video either, but it's the shorting out of circuits, crossing over, in which people report seeing sounds, hearing colors, and so on. And we talked about stacking, which is taking multiple doses before the previous dose has been completely removed from the system, so that gradually the amount in the bloodstream goes up with each succeeding dose. What you should have learned from this chapter in these videos: most hallucinogens were originally discovered in plants. New synthetic drugs may have hallucinogenic properties. Ecstasy can raise the brain temperature to dangerous levels, and in California it is illegal to sell, that includes provide, salvia to anyone under the age of 18.